Hello, Froggy here, and today we'll be getting to the giant worm in the Vow of the Disciple raid. Don't accidentally click on preservation. I have done that an embarrassing number of times. It is above that. If the enemies are all very weak, you'll know why. Anyways, we will be using the Interdimensional Rez Breach to break the box in the acquisition load. There are many different places to set your res and several different auto-reses you can use. I'll be showing you two of each. For the first one, we'll be using the auto-res right after you defeat the aspect of Savathun at the beginning of the raid. Of course, that means we're going to have to get out of map in the beginning. They patched the only proper hole here, so we're going to have to do a Sparrow breach. Luckily, there's one that isn't too bad back by the Lost Sector.
You were not guided to it, not beckoned. This domain belongs to a dark
So
entity,
we can
unknown in power. It seeks
go
domination
right
of the
here
throne world. Your presence within
and
will be
dismount
most
through this well.
Welcome, children of light.
Since that's a Dismount Breach, it's pretty easy.
From it.
This one that we're doing right now is a classic Sparrow Breach, so it's a bit more finicky. I would definitely recommend that you hold back and left in this spot, and pay attention to roughly where my cursor is when I finally get it, which should be coming up in just a moment here. Straight through the floor. Takes a little bit of practice to get that down, but all in all, it's not all that bad. If you'd prefer to avoid it, the next auto-res you can use is reaching First Encounter itself. From here, we're going to be heading out to those pillars underneath the floor. There are some barriers around. If you run into those, just shift a little bit and you should be able to get through. Naturally, since sparrows are allowed, you can sparrow fly at this point too, so this should be accessible to all classes, but once again, if you're a hunter, you're probably not going to have a good time. I'm going to get myself a little bit more height here. Since I didn't start off flying high enough, I can't just sword fly upwards. And I'm just doing this so I can get on the ground here and walk. We'll have plenty of opportunity to get more sword ammo, so that's not too big of a deal here yet. So once you get to here, we're just going to blindly jump into Disciple's Bog and die, because we want to get back into the inside of the map. And since we're not in patrol, we can actually respawn. Not that that would help you much in patrol, since the load to Bog 2 doesn't exist. And yes, there are two separate bogs. We'll see that in a moment. If you opt to do the raid normally up until just before First Encounter, you should know that I find the death to load you need to do for that a bit less consistent, and it's harder to get other people to join you afterwards. But you do have the advantage of having this door open. But luckily for us, there's a hole right up there. Just going to go ahead and stasis climb up, and so when the door is closed, a lot of the walls around are covered by entities, so you're going to want to make sure you're throwing your stasis grenade at an actual wall so you get multiple crystals. If you are a very skilled Sparrow flyer, you can just Sparrow fly directly into that hole. But I'm not that fancy, so I'm just gonna stasis climb up here and jump on in. If you have a crystal near the top, you can just crouch jump right on in and walk to the other side. Naturally, this is a sequence break. If you're going to be using the auto-res from the aspect of Savathûn, you're going to want to have someone idle the entire time at the beginning area, because getting back there would be quite a pain. Just running around a moment, because I'm going to show you one possible place to die to set your IRB point. Pretty much anything past that door will work. Just ran around so that I would respawn on this side of it and not have to climb over again. Setting it up here has the downside of requiring a 30-minute stasis climb to get to the boss room, but it does have other advantages. And there we go, that's the second bog load. If you're using that spawn point, you want to be careful to not die at any point during this. Though if you do, you can always fall back on the second spot I'll show you, which I honestly like a little bit more. The two routes have converged at this point. No matter which auto-res you're using, you want to avoid going to the first encounter door. So we're going to be going around. Luckily, if you fly at about that height, you can scoot right on past this wall. If you're using sword flying, you'll want to be careful to not expend too much of your jump here, or you won't be able to make this turn. If you're using the first auto-res, the door is not going to open for you anyways. And if you're using the second one, then you'd accidentally burn your auto-res if you went to the door. Might as well take this moment to stock up on super and ammo. If you notice the icons on the wall, you'll see that they are all darkness. That's the case for pretty much every one of those we're going to encounter, since we have done a sequence break, and I guess those are dynamically set. Who knew? Anyways, we'll be using a hole in this corner to head towards the collection load. One well-placed stasis nade would be enough to get you up. That, however, was not a well-placed stasis nade, so I'm gonna have to use a second one here. A single floaty warlock grenade should do it as well. Now we're going to keep on heading to the right here, in the direction that we would be going if we had cleared the encounter. To drop down and walk through this intangible wall. From here we're just going to sword fly to the left, where there is a handy little staircase. You don't have to land on it, but if you're doing this on, say, a warlock, it'll be a handy place to have your super recharge. Now we're just going to cut down this corridor to the left and land on top of here. We are pretty close to where we're going to hit the load. We're just going to drop down and cut this way to the right real quick, and then just float on back. Thanks to Corolla, by the way, for showing me this route. I made some little modifications here and there, but for the most part this is the route that he showed me. This is probably the biggest difference here. Found it's a little nicer to go along the outside than to fly underneath for this part. There are many possible routes for this area. This is just the one that I find easiest. At this point we're going to be ducking back underneath to climb back up to the top. I want to go to the left of this block hanging down here, because we're going to be stasis climbing up this wall. And there are a lot of convenient little places that you can land on if you stick to the left and cut out a few stasis nades. I'll be showing the full climb here just because of how many little things there are to stand on. Here we are in our first little ledge, which is unfortunately pretty much lined up with where my nade was, so I didn't gain all that much out of it. And we've got another one just to the left here. And you can see the hole that we're making our way towards. Once we're up there, we'll have the option of setting up the second IRB point. Of course, we have to get there first. Pretty nice view of our target there. So the second point that you can choose to set is over this way. I like it a little more when you actually hit the IRB. The route is a lot more interesting. Possibly faster, but definitely more interesting. Anyways, if you set that point up, you'll want to make your way back to where we started. And once again, the routes converge. Important to note if you're using the second Autorez, after that's triggered and you hit the load back into acquisition here, you will rapidly find yourself in a turnback zone, leaving the route a bit upended. You might be hearing that dialogue a lot. Anyways, we're just going to be zipping through this crate here.
Crush the defiant.
If you jump carefully, you can land on one of these upper quadrants. It's a bit easier with the sword out. And there we go. I just gotta crouch and go straight on through. We're going to be getting back into the collection load here. And now we just need to die to acquisition. If you're using the first Autorez, this door will be open. And I find it's a lot more consistent. You just got to throw a grenade right above where your head will be, walk into this corner, and then slowly move right. If all goes well, you should find your ghost right where you wanted to set it. And from here, you just need to trigger the Autorez. I'll go ahead and show you what you'll see if you choose to go with the first IRB point I showed. You don't want to go into the drop because that'll just put you back in the map. Instead, we're going to head out into the deep. Well, that's with our ghost out, we shouldn't have much problem rising from it. And now we are completely out of map. If you wanted to go to the boss room from here, you could just head directly there. However, eventually you're going to run into a very tall slanted wall. Warlock doesn't have all that much trouble using heat rises to get over it, but it is a little bit of an annoyance for stasis climbing. Unless, of course, a 30-minute stasis climb is your cup of tea. There is at least one good reason to choose this IRB spot over the other one. If you just jump off the backside, you'll see chess pieces! Not those scary ones the pyramid ship has, but the good old chess pieces that seem to appear on every load. If you're using the second Autorez, there is a slight difference in this part. Either way, I would actually recommend hitting the load up there. Hello, Rhulk.
Preservation, salvation.
Yeah, he'll do that anytime someone joins when you're in acquisition here.
Defiant.
So you'll want to go ahead and get used to that. once again, we're just going through this little bit here. But after we get to the other side, you'll notice that there's something a little bit different. This may also be the case if anyone is joining you after you've used the first IRB. The door that we were using before is closed. But luckily the right side is a reasonable substitute. This time, instead of hugging the left wall, you need to hug the right wall. And you'll throw a stasis grenade in much the same way. I find that this side likes to sometimes teleport you backwards, and if that happens, you'll have to try again. Luckily, that's not too difficult. You could have someone else put stasis behind you or use salvation script. But if you retry a few times and move over pretty slowly, you should eventually get it. The main benefit of the second Autorez is that you don't need to have someone idling at the beginning. They can join you after you're set up. They'll spawn inside of the wall here, but if they throw a stasis grenade against the wall and then die, they'll spawn back up at the beginning of the load, leaving them in a excellent position to trigger the first encounter Autorez. From there, they just need to head on towards the door in the normal way. As soon as they reach the door, it'll trigger the Autorez. At this point, you are free to move about the map, but before you head out to explore, take a moment to celebrate a job well done. There's still a ways to go, but with the IRB we have thrown off the chains of the map boundaries.
The witness sees light fall, glimpses you, free of chains, boundaries, truly limitless potential, domination unbound.
Thanks for noticing. Anyways, let's get this trip underway. There are many paths you can take, but I'd recommend starting off by climbing up this wall. At this point, I'm going to assume you can probably just stasis climb. You're going to want to keep in mind where you eventually want to head. I'd recommend forging your own path, but if you want, you can follow along with the path I take here. These slanted walls are kind of nice because you can pseudo sword fly up them by just landing on the side. Makes it very easy to get to the top with minimal stasis climbing. You'll often find pretty large flat stretches that you can use to move about quickly. Not quite as quickly as edited footage, but certainly faster than stasis climbing. Just taking a moment to get my grenade back, because you always want to have that handy in case of any unfortunate accidents. I'd also recommend having ricochet rounds available because a lot of the walls you come across will be invisible from one side, but ricochet rounds give you a pretty clear indication that there's something there, and they'll also bounce off of any intangible surface that's covering what you're shooting at. Gonna make my way up to the first little ledge here, and there's a ceiling on this part, so we actually need to go around a little bit. Luckily the ceiling isn't all that tall. Go ahead and burn a little bit of our precious sword ammo. Luckily we can still regenerate ammo using the swapping glitch, where you just switch between something like jagged and enduring. Plus, you get a one-time free flag usage still if you drop back into the map. There are some pretty good spots to do that, I think pretty close to here. Anyways, let's keep heading over to the boss. Good idea to always check what's open and what's not. A little bit of looking before you leap. Got a pretty nice overview of first encounter here. Catch a glimpse of the horse. That looks like a reasonable target over there. So I am a little saddened that it looks like patrol is not reachable from the raid, which means our IRB shenanigans are currently just limited to inside of the raid itself. Hopefully we will find one eventually, but in the meantime, this will have to do. Yeah, you always want to keep your ricochet rounds handy to tell when these walls end, or you'll just end up falling randomly, and that's never fun. Just gonna go ahead and see how far this goes. Looks like we've got an opening over to the left. Generally, these slanted walls have holes at the top of them. They're really only there to provide the illusion from the ground, after all. No need to have the top finished up all nicely. Well, that's convenient. Definitely was short a bit on the height there. So I was also hoping that they would enable the load into the raid for second bog from patrol after the raid launch, but that doesn't seem to have happened, and the bog of the Disciple from patrol remains a kind of glitchy mess. Who knows, maybe at some point that'll be corrected one way or the other. Anyways, we're going to be making our way through what I think is the outside of the jumping puzzle, or maybe third encounter at this point. I'm not quite sure. I do know that over this stretch is the final bit of the approach. Oh, we've got a nice solid wall here, and looks like it's nice and open. I'm gonna save a bit of sword ammo and just stasis my way across here. If you have the raid armor, you can get pretty fast grenade recharges. Once again, not quite as fast as video editing magic, but probably not all that much slower, to be honest. Just stack that up on all your armor pieces and stack it with your normal climbing gear, and it should make your grenade zoom on up. A lot of the stuff in this area is intangible, so watch out for that. In general, staircases should be safe, and certain other structures. Anytime you find something solid out of map, everything else of that type is generally solid as well. It is a handy thing to keep in mind. We could probably directly go to the boss from here, but let's at least get ourselves a bit of height first. Well, that's solid. Gonna have to get around the top here. And... oh. Oh! Whoops. Well, never waste an opportunity to gain a bit of sword ammo. Soon. Our first up-close view of the worm. What a way to fall here. Sadly, you can't get to those background structures because they're beyond the true edge. But at least we can reach the worm. I'm gonna go ahead and set my ammo back to full, and I've gained a little bit. Anyways, back to where I fell. Just gonna go to the inside face here. You can see the intangible wall it kind of clipped in. See if we can get the stasis to partially be on the other side. Yep. Takes out the guesswork there. Go a little bit higher, see if we can get on top of the platform we're climbing. This feels a little bit sketchy. I think I'm just gonna go for it. Yeah, it was probably the right call. I believe those platforms you see above me right now are also solid, so if you end up doing the rest of the jumping puzzle area, you can give that a shot. Surprisingly, pretty much the entire boss area is here and solid. I guess they just use the room itself as the indicator from afar. We don't get the symbols on the pillars, though. And now we've made it. Let's go say hello to the worm mother. Just drop off. Did it just move? Alright then. I guess it moves. You can see it kind of subtly moving around like some sort of a distortion. Also seems to have a bit of a shader bug going on here. Naturally, something that you see at such a distance isn't very well polished, but that is to be expected. This all looks very neat. Of course, the entire worm is intangible. I don't think you can reach the secret worm door down there because of, interesting enough, there are death barriers around here. A little bit unexpected out of box, but, you know, I guess they're there. Got a bit of regular texture coming up. Wonder how far we'll be able to go. Never mind. So we've hit a death barrier. Another interesting thing you can do in this area is climb up the entirety of the structure above where you battle Rhulk. can just use the pillars to get ahead. And away we go. This is definitely a long climb, but hopefully the view will be worth it. You don't want to know how long this would be without these rapid edits. Eventually you'll reach the first level at least. Not quite at the top yet. I wouldn't climb all that way just to go to the first level. You get some interesting views from here though. Gives you a different perspective on the boss arena. Anyways, let's keep going. Got something solid above us. Well, that's pretty nice. But I do believe we can get a bit higher. Oh, that's intangible. Oh, that was kind of straightforward. Oh, onwards and upwards. And I wish you could actually just propel yourself upwards this fast with stasis grenades. I don't think Warlock would have a good time with this one. Oh, well, there we go. We have reached the top, and I gotta say, this wasn't quite the view I was hoping for. Seems there is an intangible ceiling blocking all the good stuff. Well, at least we can see the upper area. Wonder if we can climb that, but I think I've had my fill of stasis climbing for now. Whee! Wonder how much of the rest of the worm we can trace out. Oh yeah, and these are solid. That's kind of nice. Anyways, let's get back to our worm adventures. We can meet up with it after it's curved back a ways, and hopefully that'll put us outside of the reach of the death barrier we hit before. I'm sure we'll hit one eventually, or perhaps even the box pull as we get closer to first encounter. The worm is rather long. Well, that didn't last too long at all. When I was doing the raid originally, I figured the worm was empowering Rhulk, but I guess it turned out it was actually the other way around. Well, this is all intangible. But, luckily for us, this weird square-nosed horse that you can see from first encounter is in fact solid, which makes sense given that there is a smaller version of that statue over there. Whee! So if you've ever wanted a giant square-nosed horse, you know where to go. Well, before I head out, we might as well check out one of these structures in the distance. Luckily, they aren't all beyond the true edge. For instance, this tower over here in the distance. It'd be a bit too much to hope for it to be solid. But at the very least, it is reachable. And that's gotta count for something. Wonder what else is awaiting discovery out in the distance of the raid. Hopefully you'll be able to find out for yourself.